Well, here we are in the lounge room, home of the mad. Musicians making a difference. And they are making a difference in young people's lives, young people who struggle with life. And they do it through music, spoken word, and creativity. And they create a sense of belonging, a sense of family, a sense of security that these people maybe not have had in their lives. And that is a very worthwhile, good task they're doing. And this year their ideals are excellence and freedom. And I thought, excellence and freedom, does that go together? Because excellence is a bit like hard work and discipline and doing things on time and doing things repeatedly. And freedom is the opposite of that, that you can do things you want and like and whenever you want to do it. But maybe they belong together. Because if you have a community, an organization like the MAD, everything that is done practically needs to function, and it needs to function to a high degree. And the higher degree it functions on, the more relaxed the individuals can be in knowing that everything is taken care of. And that feeling would create a sense of freedom. And it would help to disperse anxiety and worry in people. And when I was a child, I lived in Sweden, in such a forest that Lindy told you about. And I was, of course, she has taken it away from me, I can't do it. So all I can tell you is that it was a lovely place for a child to grow up in, as you probably imagine from what she said. And I could roam around those forests completely free. And my parents, they were hardworking, honest, what you would say morally upright people. So I had a very, very secure upbringing as a child. But even so, when I became an adolescent and a young adult, and I was about to take my steps into adulthood, I didn't have the tools and the strength to do that. I was a very worried and very nervous and inhibited person, and I didn't have that strength of taking the step into whatever it was I needed to do. And when I look back, I didn't have any help from school, and I didn't have any help from potential employers, and my family couldn't help me either, and my peers definitely couldn't help me, probably because they were in the same situation, I don't know. But they didn't show it to me. I felt I was the only one that was struggling. So at that stage in my life, to cover all those problems up, I did all those stupid things that young people do. And I was going to tell you all about them also, but I think that would take a long, long, long time to tell you that, and it would be a little bit boring, because you all know what I did with your imagination. So to make a long story short, when I was 27 years of age, it dawned on me one day with full clarity that, Ulf, you have not achieved anything in your life yet, and you are wasting your life away. And it was one of those moments that I think many of us experience now and again in our life, when we feel life isn't very much, when it stands in front of us in a naked truth that where there's no illusion of our abilities and capabilities. But in the darkest moment of life, like this was for me, it is like in the fairy tale. You get help from somewhere. And in my case, it was not ants or ducks or bees or a little dwarf or a witch or anything like that, fairy woman. It was a very, very good friend. She had lived in England for a whole year in an intentional community called Camp Hill Communities. Their task was to care for people with mental handicap, people with special needs. And she came back from England and she was brimming over with enthusiasm of all the things that she had experienced in this community. And she told me about it all the time, again and again and again. And do you know, Ulf, in this community, people, the staff, the co-workers, they lived together with the special needs people. Not in a client to patient relationship, but on a life-sharing basis as equals. Wow, could you live like that? And you know, Ulf, they have consensus making decision, non-hierarchical organizations. Wow, very good, interesting. And what was most interesting, when she told me that they weren't salaried in the normal way. They were not salaried according to the amount of work they did, or rank, or position or skill. They did the work because it was needed to be done. And then they were salaried according to personal needs. Now that was amazing for me, because at that time of my life I was fed up with how things were arranged in the world, and I wondered if I lived in a sensible world. And then she said they got the spiritual striving underpinning what they're doing. It's called anthroposophy. And that comes from Greek. Anthropos meaning human being, and the other word Sophia, wisdom. Wisdom of the human being. And she told me that, you know, every human being has a healthy individuality, a healthy kernel, and that healthy individuality is moving from life to life in reincarnations. It doesn't matter how distorted and disabled our outer guise is in this life, our inner kernel is healthy. That sounded also amazing to me. And the more she told me, it clicked in me, and I knew I had to go and experience one of these places. So I found myself at Sturts Farm Campbell community in Dorset in the south of England. It was a biodynamic farm. It had 20-odd special needs people there. And one of the specialities of these places is that young people come from all over the world to spend their gap year there, and to work on the farm and to work with the handicapped people, to share their lives with them. So there I met Cecilia from Chile, and she couldn't speak a word of English when I met her, so we had to communicate through the dictionary. And Kate, the white South African, one day she stood out in the carrot field. It was muddy and wet, and we were dirty, and she looked at her dirty hands and she said, "I have never been so dirty in all my life." And then there was Darren. He came from Adelaide. He was a strong, powerful, young Australian man. And you know all how powerful and strong the young Australian men are, don't you? And he was very idealistic. And he decided that when he came back home to Australia, he was going to train with the SAS and become an SAS soldier, because he was convinced that the work and task of the SAS was what keeps the peace and balance on this earth. And there was many other young people that I met there. But what I took mostly away from Sturts Farm was possibly the relationship between the handicapped people, the people with special needs. Yes, they are very challenging, and they tested my patience to the limit. But they also have an open and uninhibited relationship to people around them and to the whole world. And they wouldn't treat anybody different, whether you're the king or the servant. They don't mind. So there I had Alexandra, and she asked me again and again of the make of my Hoover and washing machine at home. And there was the happy red-haired Stuart, and he could talk to me and tell me about his nan in Northampton until I told him to shut up. And then there was Simon, the little Down syndrome man. He would put his arms around me and look up at me and say, "Ulf, I love you." So it was so amazing to be in this environment of these people and the atmosphere that they created. And I realized that in those days we called them people with special needs. And these terms change as times go. But I thought people with special needs was not the right term. They were people with special gifts, and they give these gifts freely to all of us. And the other thing I took away from there was the work on the land and the plants and the animals. So in the middle of winter, I went out into the cow barn before 6 o'clock in the morning. It was pitch dark and it was cold, below freezing. When I opened the door into the barn, there the cows were lying peacefully, those big animals on the straw. And slowly, slowly they stood up one by one. I opened the gate and let them out into the farmyard, and in their own pace, unhurriedly they walked out. Nothing could change their pace. And their breath stood around them like a big mist in that cold weather, out of their big, big nostrils. And then they walked into to the milking parlor one by one, and there they got their feed, they were chained up. And I took the milking stool and took the milking bucket, and I sat down by the end of the cow, put the milking bucket between my knees, and found the teats, and psh, 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 the milk poured into that bucket. And the room was filled with the warmth of those animals, and the smell of cow and cow shit and cow urine and milk, and all that was mixed up into a musty, musty scent. It smells very special. I don't know if anybody of you has ever felt it, what cow shit, cow urine and cow milk smell together, but it's a very good smell. It's got power in it, and I was bathing in this power as I was there. A cornerstone in these Camp Hill communities is something that they call devotion to the little thing. And it means that you do things with presence of mind, you do it with love, you do things with care, every task that you do. And also that the smallest, maybe most insignificant daily task is as important as the big overarching tasks. So I learned that devotion there, devotion and love and care somehow. And that was what I took away from him. And devotion and care. That is what is living here in the lounge room, in MAD. And it leads to excellence and freedom.